Sometimes you just gotta put the money in. We're in the small blind with Jack Queen of Diamonds. It gets raised to 15 in front of me. I make the call and the player behind me decides to go all in pre-flop and he has $87 total. The original raiser folds, it gets back around to me and I'm last to act. And because I'm last to act, I make the call with about 25 dead money in the pot. We're headed to a run out, no more action. The player I'm playing against is all in. The board comes out, Jack 7, 8, 3, 10. It's a great board for my hand. We flop top pair. Our opponent flips over ace king and we win the pot and bust another player in a cash game. Always do the opposite of what your opponent wants. We're in middle position. I have ace 6 of hearts. I raise it up to 10 and the player behind me immediately goes all in for $46. It gets around to me. Everybody else folded. I'm last to act. I ask my opponent if he wants a call and he tells me to flip over 1 and then he'll decide. I flip over the 6 of hearts. My opponent says don't call and right away I put my chips in the middle. I have ace 6 of hearts. My opponent flips over 5-5 for pocket fives. We made a good call. We have 2 overcards to his pair. The dealer puts the board out. Jack 9, 3, 7, king. We don't hit any pairs. We lose the pot, but I'm happy I made the call. We picked this one up late. I have 9, 10 of spades. It was raised pre-flop and then I 3-bet to 40. The player behind me went all in for 87 and then another player cold called 87. I also make the call. One player's all in. We're headed to a flop 3 ways. The flop comes out 10, 7, king with 2 diamonds. I check. The only time I would bet in this spot is if I flopped an absolute monster. The other player also checks. The turn card is the queen of clubs. I check. The other player checks. The ace of spades comes on the river. We both check again. One of my opponents flips over pocket eights. The other one has ace king. And the player who went all in with ace king takes down the pot. I didn't realize that I rivered a high hand. I have king queen of diamonds. I'm under the gun. I raise to 15. I get 1 caller and the big blind also calls. We're going to a flop 3 ways. It's a good flop for my hand. Queen 9 jack rainbow with 1 diamond. First player checks. I bet 30 and the player behind me decides to min raise up to 60. Now a lot of the times when they do this, the player has a monster hand. So when it got back around to me, I decided to just call. We're going to a turn heads up, which is the 9 of diamonds. We now have a diamond draw. We now have a gut shot straight draw, which we already had. I check to my opponent and he bets 75 on the turn. Keep in mind, I have only about 225 behind. After thinking for a bit, I make the call for 75 and the river card comes the 10 of diamonds. We make a flush. I probably should have bet here because I made a flush sneakily, but instead of betting, I checked and my opponent quickly checks. I flip over king queen of diamonds for the flush and I didn't even realize that I rivered a straight flush to the king. If I knew that, I would have went all in, hoping my opponent would have called. He had ace queen, I had a straight flush, and I win the pot. We're on the button with ace jack offsuit. The pot gets raised to 10. A lot of players start folding. It gets around to me. I make the call for 10. Everyone else folds. We're going to a flop heads up. The flop comes out 10 king deuce with 2 hearts. We flop a gut shot straight draw. Our opponent bets 15, which is not enough for me to fold. I make the call. We're going to the turn. The turn is the ace of clubs. We now have top pair on the turn with the ace and our opponent bets 45, pretty much a full pot size bet. There's no way I could fold on the turn after improving, so I make the call. We're in position headed to a river. The river card comes out the 8 of clubs and my opponent doesn't stop betting. He 3 barrels and bets a full pot size bet of 155 on the river. Now I'm thinking to myself, if he has a really good hand here, would he be betting full pot or would he bet a little bit smaller and try to get value out of me if I have like a king or a 10, something like that? After thinking it over, I decide to make the call and my read was somewhat right. I was calling him all the way down. He had pocket eights and he rivered a set on me. I called on the river, which I probably shouldn't have, but I kind of knew that he didn't have anything. This was a tough hand to swallow. We're under the gun. We got pocket kings. I raise to 20. One player calls. The small blind calls. We're going to a flop 3 ways. It's a great flop for pocket kings. kings. It comes jack 8-4 with 2 clubs. Small blind checks. I bet 40. The other player folds, and now the decision's on the small blind. He's got 155 in total. After he thinks it over, he decides to go all in for 155, and obviously I'm not going anywhere with my overpair of kings. The turn comes out the ace of spades, the river's the 4 of diamonds, and my opponent flips over ace 9 of clubs. He had an overcard with a flush draw. I had pocket kings. I was about 70% when the money went all in. We end up losing the pot to a bad beat after our opponent turns an ace for a higher pair. Absolutely sick.